Mind Control with Chase Hughes. So let's talk about the iatrogenesis, because that's my favorite, and that's kind of the topic of tonight. We're not really in a psychology classroom here, even though I called this a lecture. There are 4 qualities that make someone very easy to create some kind of a dissociation in their personality. In this, we have the first one is called fantasy proneness. A person is prone to fantasy thinking. And the second is suggestibility, and this is the most important one. And in all of my classes, I teach people how to manufacture suggestibility. So if someone's not very suggestible, you can ramp it up to a 10 within 5 or 6 minutes tops. And there's also physical signs of suggestibility, which people exhibit. And number 3 is dissociative symptoms. That means that they've had some kind of practice in their life of dissociating. And this could be something as small or insignificant as being bullied once when they were in middle school. Just a couple of things in their life experience that has made them dissociate and given them some kind of a practice, some kind of a habit. And finally, number 4, they're susceptible to pseudo memories or false memories. And false memories are something that a therapist can create, not just because they're in this trusting environment, but because of the authority that the therapist holds. And the person sitting in a therapist's office automatically becomes more suggestible because they're there to get their mind worked on. They're there to be open. They're there to be very vulnerable. That's the place they do those things. We can create that anytime. But the pseudo memories, if anybody's fascinated with this ability to create fake memories, which you can do even in a conversation with a person pretty easily. The woman who has done most of the research is named Susan Loftus, Loftus. Susan Loftus. So finally, this therapist is talking to these people and unknowingly saying things. They might make them take a little survey, and the survey they take is sometimes something the therapist makes up on their own. And the survey might have questions on it, and they take it, and who's scoring it? The same person who made it. So it's up to the interpretation of that therapist. So if the therapist has a test and gets the test back and says, "Oh, you scored an 18 out of 20, or you scored a 95 out of 100, that's a big deal." And we're saying this to the patient. That makes the person automatically accept that they probably have a disorder. And even if they scored high on this, even if they scored low, the therapist can still interpret it differently. So there's anytime someone assigns a numerical value to quizzes and tests and stuff, I automatically call bullshit. Because we're organisms, and we can't do that with things like psychology. We can estimate, we can absolutely estimate things, but we can't say that there's a cutoff line here. There's always kind of a gray area. But then the therapist would start saying things like, I would ask a question if I was this therapist, saying, do you feel like there are other people inside of you? And the person says, well, yeah, maybe. And then I said, well, you know what? Try to let that little girl come out right now. Let that little girl come out. Now they didn't even tell me it was a little girl. Now I'm creating a false person inside of there just by saying a statement that I'm trying to help. So that's how the iatrogenesis starts with DID. So, or somebody says, you know, it sounds like there's more than one person in there. Would you agree with that? Or they say, do you ever feel like you're not yourself? And the person says, yeah, all of us would say yes. Everybody says yes to that question. And then after that question, they say, do you think that's when the other part of you starts to take over? another leading question that starts to create this dissociation a little bit further. We all have parts. Here's another one. We all have parts. But, you know, some of us have parts that want to do their own thing. Is this true for you? And these questions are so, they sound innocuous and they sound like we're trying to do the right thing. But if we have somebody that's hyper suggestible and we have someone that's fantasy prone, and then they go home after they've taken this dissociative experiences scale and they start Googling all of this stuff, bam, that's a full-blown disorder. It's an iatrogenically created dissociative identity disorder, and it starts ruining the person's life. And they call their therapist a week later, and they say, I can't remember the last 3 days. My room is full of shopping bags, full of clothing that I don't remember buying. I have a brand new car in the driveway, and my mirror is shattered in the bathroom. I'm missing a lot of my medication. My pills are gone. And that's when that stuff starts happening. And they genuinely lose memories. Another guy that is worthy of mention here is Dr. Jose Delgado. And Dr. Delgado was a neuroscientist based at Yale around the same time that Milgram was there. I'm assuming they were friends. I've never seen evidence of it. But Dr. Delgado, he invented a system to place electrodes in the human brain with good intent, as all of these things eventually start, with good intent. So he had good intentions here, and he wanted to prevent the procedure called a frontal lobotomy, which was a common practice, which if you go Google like how that stuff used to be done, it was a hammer and an ice pick. That's it. And they go right through your eye socket into the front part of your brain. So he wanted to stop this. And Dr. Delgado invented this way to implant electrodes into the brain. And he started with rats and mice and eventually went to chimpanzees. And there's some wonderful photos of him and these chimpanzees that he had implanted into. And as far as we know, he experimented on 25 people with consent with these electrodes. And his ultimate goal was to eliminate aggression in people who are highly aggressive and stop depression and some forms of mental illness. And there's a great video you can look up on YouTube of him having implanted these electrodes into the skull or into the brain of a bull. And this is, I think, in Spain or Mexico. And the bull is really angry, has a ton of aggression. And he has a remote control wireless radio transmitter, which today would be tiny, but it was a big box with a big antenna on it. And as the bull, he stood in the arena and let the bulls charge at him. And as the bull charged at him, he started pushing a button. And the bull stopped and reversed course immediately. But it started getting really bad results. So one of the women that was working as a volunteer had these electrodes in her brain, thought that Dr. Delgado was her father and called him dad, and then made sexual advances that were extremely against her normal character of being. So he stopped. And as far as we know, and he was never interviewed about it. But that whole thing was just the beginning of what a lot of people say is still going on today, although I haven't seen any evidence of it. And trust me, even with access to all the government's computers, I've searched every one of those phrases on the secrets stuff and all that, and I haven't found anything. And the LSD was a big part of that experiment. So they would use LSD with the brain implant electrodes to monitor human behavior. And like we said, the CIA got most of it from Switzerland, where it was being massively developed over there. It was used in Operation Midnight Climax. And the LSD eventually seeped into the interrogations and back into Canada for Dr. Cameron to use at the Allen Institute on his patients. And once the documents were ordered to be destroyed with the CIA, the CIA director in 1973, his name was Richard Helms, ordered the destruction of all of the documents. And of course, there are multiple copies in safes all over America, and 20,000 of those documents survived, along with the stuff that I got from Dr. Estabrooks, which I've not publicly shared. So there's a whole lot of research that we can look at. There's even research from the CIA where they used hypnosis in a conversational pattern where a woman they called Mrs. W. They gave her a revolver that she saw loaded with real bullets. And while she was under hypnosis, they switched them to blanks. And they made her walk out in the hallway, and they said, your friend is not going to wake up, and you're going to try as hard as you can, and nothing is going to wake her up. Even if she looks awake, she's not awake. And you're going to do everything in your power to wake her up. And they made her go shoot her friend in the chest. And it worked. They even had some of these women at the CIA place bombs in office buildings that were artificial bombs. They weren't real. But to see if it could be done. And it was highly effective. And a lot of this was based on the work of Dr. George Estabrooks, who was a fabulous hypnotist and probably one of the most unknown and least mentioned people when we watch documentaries about MK Ultra or the CIA. We're coming up to another break here. But let's settle a debate. Can you be hypnotized against your will? Asking if you and I, anybody in here, we're in a room together and I have a syringe full of poison and I'm not some military fighter guy. Can I give you an injection against your will, or will you take me down? Or you can punch me in the face, or can I give you the injection? You'd punch me, right? Yeah. So you can stop yourself from getting an injection. And it's much the same with hypnosis. The question whether or not you can be hypnotized against your will is silly. Because will implies knowledge of action. Your will implies knowledge of action. If we're sitting at dinner and I put a syringe on the table and I'm like, hey, Ryan, I'm going to stab this in your butt cheek and empty this thing into you. You're going to be like, yeah, good luck, brother. And you grab a steak knife and stand up. You can slice me up, and I'm probably not going to give you that injection. So that would be with your will. And a person, it's true. If a person knows that hypnosis is about to take place, we announce that it's going to happen, and a person genuinely doesn't want it to happen, they scream out loud, they put their fingers in their ears, they can resist as hard as they want, they reach into their pocket and pinch their leg as hard as they frickin' can, they bite down on their tongue. It's going to be really hard to hypnotize somebody against their will. But you can be hypnotized without your consent. I could be at dinner with you and just hide that syringe until we're walking out and jab it in you. That's not will. That's consent, or that's awareness. So there's a big difference there. So when a hypnotherapist tells you you can't be hypnotized against your will, that's probably true because you're aware of the situation happening. But if you're not aware of it happening, then that's consent and awareness. So that goes back to the chart that we saw at the very beginning of our talk tonight, where it talked about active and passive, conscious and unconscious. So it's active and it's unconscious. That's without your consent. If we move into that red circle in that corner. So hopefully now that makes a little more sense. So active and fully aware of it, that's your will. Because we're willing it to happen. We're either consent or not consent. We can not consent if we're aware that it's going to happen. I can still give you an injection whether you like it or not. I've just got to be a little more sneaky about it. or just not announce the fact that I'm going to do it. And that's the difference. Because I've always heard that age-old question of, can you be hypnotized against your will? And I always thought it was a little bit silly, because it implies that the person knows that it's happening. We know that it's coming, and you can fight it. Then again, there are situations where that is possible. Let's take a stage hypnosis experience. A very good friend of mine, his name is Rich Guzzi. He's one of the most famous stage hypnotists in the world, I think. And he gets up there on stage. He pretends like he's randomly picking people from the audience, bringing them up there, sitting them down in the chairs, but he knows exactly who he's picking. He makes it look random, so to the rest of the audience, it looks like he's not picking only suggestible people. And that helps. They get up there. It's an amazing show. They go out. He's pointing at them, sleep, and they fall over. You know, this big dramatic display of hypnosis, and it's hilarious. That then convinces everyone in the audience of his power. So then, even if somebody is not willing to be hypnotized, he can look out on the audience and just point at somebody and say, sleep. Even if it's against their will, at that moment, that is possible to do it against somebody's will, because the power has been demonstrated. And that sets up A, expectation, B, a social contract, which is why social contracts are the entire reason that the bystander effect exists. We make a social contract with other people that's very silent and very quiet and never spoken. So we have, I don't remember what the first one was. I was kind of riffing on that. So we have expectation, social contract, and the third thing is authority. He has established himself as the leader. He's holding the microphone. This guy has seen all these other people get hypnotized, and now he's getting pointed at. He sees that finger getting leveled down at him. And as that finger comes down, he's like, oh shit, I know what's going to happen. That's the expectancy. Number two, the finger is coming down. He's like, oh shit, I know what's going to happen, and everyone's looking. And number three, this guy's the authority. He's the hypnotist in the room. If I don't comply or go under, then I might look like an idiot, and he could probably ridicule me. And that's authority. So that is against your will. Let's talk really quick about hypnosis and what that means and how it kind of relates to mind control. So hypnosis varies based on who you ask. Every single person who teaches hypnosis has a different example of it. All the way down to somebody saying, well, you used the toilet today. That's hypnosis. That's a form of hypnosis. Oh, you shaved your face with a Mach 3 razor blade today? That's a form of hypnosis as well. Everything's hypnosis. That's just to the point where, like, oh, you took a cork out of a wine bottle. That's some form of hypnosis. It gets ridiculous very quickly with a lot of these trainings. And hypnosis is not a state. It is a technique, or a trance is a state. Hypnosis is a technique. It's like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Kathy O'Brien, I think, is 90% full of it. Shows incredible deception indicators. I just saw a comment pop up. So I asked my Alexa earlier today what hypnosis was, and she said it was a procedure. And I completely agree with that it's a thing that we do, like CBT, aversion therapy, talk therapy, trauma release exercise, or EMDR, or any of these therapeutic approaches. It's just a technique. And she said here's Alexa's exact, I don't want to say it quietly because I don't want to trigger mine or yours in the background. I heard Doug earlier tell his Alexa to set a timer. So she says it's a procedure that creates an altered state of awareness more open to suggestion, which I fully agree with that. Absolutely agree with that. So aversion therapy cognitive behavioral therapy are forms of mind control. 100%. They can also be reverse engineered to control people. If you took cognitive behavioral therapy and all the steps and then applied it to a car sales technique or a car sales environment, you can control a lot of people with that stuff. And the entire process of hypnosis is fairly straightforward. It's just a 4-step process. It's an induction, a deepener, a suggestion, and wake up. That's it. And that's according to Dr. Richard Nongard, not Chase Hughes. So anything that's persuasive is mind control. If a friend tells you to go to a restaurant and it makes you, he describes the tacos in such a way that you want to go to that restaurant, that is a form of mind control or persuasion. But the line that I draw with mind control is that black center circle, where it's for the negative impact on somebody else. And especially the lower right. So the black circle already is inside of the non-consent area. So there's no consent. It's without someone's awareness, and it's with negative intent for the other person.